Press Herald CEO Lisa DeSisto and CEO of the VIA agency, Leeann Leahy.
When was the last time you went to an event in Maine that opened with Ray Liotta, Odom Beckham Jr., and Jeff Foxworthy?
And Reggie Watts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You have the best job. That is very, very, very cool opening reel and a great way to wake up. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and welcome to my guest, Leeann Leahy, the CEO of the VIA agency. As we do at Like a Boss, we start with an interactive bio. So Leeann, it's all about you, lady. Tell us, where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York, outside of New York in Westchester County, born and raised, and I was actually one of those people who legitimately thought New York was the center of the universe. I was there my whole life. I worked in New York City, and I kind of never thought I'd go anywhere. I was not quite one of those people who thought you get nosebleeds above 14th Street, but I was close. And then about 4 years ago, I got lucky enough to have an opportunity to move up here, and I have just been so thrilled with being here. So.
Now, you jumped ahead quite a bit.
I did. I
yeah,
kinda
you did.
condensed
But
it.
so we're going to backtrack a little bit. Tell us about where you went to college.
I went to College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass., which I was second generation to go there, which is kind of nice. And now I have a niece there, so she's the 9th member of our family to go.
Do we have any other Crusaders in the audience? Okay, not in Portland, not a popular school apparently.
We have a few.
But we,
I have a few up here.
Yeah. My best friend from 6th grade went there, so
Really?
I think highly
Yeah,
of
it was a really wonderful experience. Because I loved, the thing about it is, and I'm telling this to my son because now he is applying to colleges. Well, not quite, but he's starting the process. And what I tell him all the time is, I loved going to a liberal arts school because I learned how to learn, which means you can do anything. And in my career, I've sort of put that to the test because I started in advertising as, see how I backtracked there?
Yeah, I like that.
I started in advertising as an account planner, which is about garnering insights and inspiring the creative process. And that's a very different skill set from actually running the business of our business and being
Right.
the CEO. And it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I started to really learn the business of our business. And I credit Holy Cross a lot for that because I can take on any challenge.
Well, I think you should be on the cover of the Alumni magazine if you haven't yet. So I will send them a note about that.
Well, thank you.
But I think your career in advertising started even earlier than that. So what was your
Yes.
first job in advertising?
I was 6 months old.
Oh,
Yeah, I guess I always knew what I wanted to do. I was 6 months old, and I was the Ivory Snow baby. So I was the Ivory Snow
that's
baby
why you
for
look
a
so
couple of years.
familiar.
Yeah. Me and Brooke Shields, you know.
Yeah, that's right. That's good company. Now, do you still use it? Ivory Snow?
No.
Oh,
Does anyone?
I don't. And then, so you made your move from the Ivory Snow baby. What was your first job in an advertising agency?
My first job in an advertising agency was an agency called Backer Spielvogel Bates. And it was in the early 90s. I graduated from college in 92 and started there when a lot of agencies were merging together, and every agency, which is sort of funny because they're advertising agencies, you think they could do better names, but they were all merging lots of names together. So Backer Spielvogel Bates.
Yeah, they need some branding help for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I started I started in research, which morphed into account planning. And I got to work on lots of great brands. I worked on M&M Mars, so Snickers and M&Ms and Uncle Ben's. I worked on, gosh, I'm aging myself when I say these things, but I worked on TWA a little bit. And
So that was a great campaign, obviously, for them. Sorry.
Snickers. Did I say Snickers?
Snickers is, so I have one on my desk. I have one
There
on
you
my
go.
desk, yeah. And it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault at all. I didn't, I always get, see, I
Yeah.
always, 10 minutes in and I'm in trouble.
That's right.
With my guests.
And after BSB, I went to an agency called Christian Baum and Bond, and there I worked on Snapple, and I led the Snapple account as a planner for a while, and that was really fun because we were kind of one of the first to do the beginnings of live advertising. We were fulfilling letters. So Wendy, the Snapple lady, for those of you old enough to remember, used to receive letters, and then we would go out and actually film her fulfilling the letters, and those became the commercials.
Oh, great,
So they were
right.
completely unscripted, and it was really fun. And that business just grew by leaps and bounds, and that was a great experience.
Yeah, certainly that whole beverage category has changed quite dramatically.
Yeah, it's a fun category to play in, but
Yeah.
And then after Kirschenbaum, I went to Saatchi and Saatchi, and at took a brief interlude to do a little bit of dot-comming, because that's what we did in the late 90s. And I was at Saatchi and Saatchi for a little while. I worked on brands like Delta Airlines and Bell Atlantic, another disappearing brand. But I was there for a short period of time, and then I went to an agency called Margiotis Fertitta and Partners, where I built an account planning department.
So then talk about how you got recruited to your job here.
Okay. So after Margiotis, I went to this global agency, and I was doing global planning jobs. And so I sort of learned a lot about planning in different cultures, and I learned kind of every angle of account planning. So in 2011-ish, 2010, 2011, I had an opportunity to make that switch, as I talked about, from planning to general management. And I took over an agency called Translation in New York City. And it was an interesting challenge because it was run by an ex-hip-hop mogul, friends with Jay-Z and Kanye and all that crowd. So I had a little bit of that time with me. And we built that agency from 30 people to 130 people in 18 months.
Wow.
And we won the Bud Light account, which was like the biggest account you can win. And we were right at the height of all of that. And I was working like crazy and hiring 90 people and trying to get a campaign out the door for Bud Light. It was insane. And ex-hip-hop people can be insane. And I was introduced to John Coleman, who is the founder of VIA. And someone said, I think you guys are going to like each other. And it was kind of amazing because I was like, I don't have much time to meet people. I'm doing all this work. But I'll take the meeting because you never know. And we had a great time. I met John Coleman and Greg Smith for lunch. And I think we had like a 2-hour lunch. And we left. And I was kind of struck because I think we had so much fun at that lunch. I remembered that our business was supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. And so we became friends. And over the course of about 6 or 8 months, John said, would you consider coming to Maine to help me run VIA? Which was a really great thing. And you know, as I said, I never really thought I'd leave New York. So there was a moment there where I went home and I started to talk to my husband, who's there somewhere. And I said, what do you think about moving to Maine? He's like, I have a bag in the closet, let's go. Yeah. But he said, honestly, Leeann, I've seen you have so much success over the last few years and not a lot of happiness. And every time you hang out with these guys from VIA, you're just so happy. And so we took the bag out of the closet, and here I am.
Wow. So a pretty big transition, though, from Manhattan to Congress Street. Tell us a little bit about VIA, the agency, how many people work there, and also you came in as president and then transitioned to CEO from a visionary founder. So what was that transition like? I'm taking your baby.
Yeah. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know. That's why.
I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
So I actually think it was less transition from Madison Avenue to Congress Street than you would think. And that's partly because VIA operates on a national level. So you saw, we work with Unilever and Proximo Spirits and Facebook and Pacific Life and big clients all over the country. And fortunately, LL Bean now at home as well, which is really nice. But we operate kind of the same way that I always have in all the agencies I've worked at, with one big difference. And that is, I think, we actually have to be better and smarter than those agencies in New York and LA, because we don't have the resources right at our fingertips. We don't have the client down the street. So we have to work that much harder. And I kind of love it, because you might think, well, you're going to Maine and it's going to be chilling out. It's actually been a ramping up, and I think that's wonderful. So that's the first question.
Yep.
I did come in as president, and I was here for 2 years, and John asked me to take over as CEO, which was incredibly humbling. And it was a very involved transition, I would say, that is probably still ongoing. But I've been in the role for about a year now. And last year, we took a lot of time, really a lot of time, and I credit John with this, to hear what was going on in the agency, to understand where people's sort of temperature was, to manage the culture. We were going through some rocky business stuff as well, and so to manage the culture, to be ready for it. And then we also did a lot of soul searching around what the vision for the company was. And the whole executive team got together and thought about, what is it we want to be, where do we want to go, what are we striving for? And then we really want to articulate that to to the agency. And it was an important exercise because it was methodical and thoughtful, and when we made the announcement, it wasn't made in a vacuum. It was in the context of saying, this is where we're headed as an agency, here are the strategies that we're going to employ to get there. We've also John announced the beginning of a transition to become employee-owned, and then in the context of all of that, he also announced me becoming CEO.
Now, being employee-owned, how is that, use it as a recruiting tool? People feel vested in the company's success?
Yeah, we're in the very beginning stages of a long and very complicated and innovative process. But really, it fits with the founder's political and sort of philanthropic philosophy. So that's the baseline. It tells you a lot about who we are. But the reason that I love it for a business perspective is we're in a creative industry. And I'm now competing with talent I'm competing with Google and Facebook. Yesterday I saw Bloomberg hired a chief creative officer away from Ogilvy and Mather. So we are having really a talent drain in our industry. And it's really important that we get the best, freshest, most scalable minds. And if I can offer someone the opportunity to effectively work for themselves, why wouldn't the best want to take that chance? So it allows us to recruit far and wide.
And how is Maine a help or a hindrance in getting talent here?
I think it's a help. I think it's a help for talent. I think it's still a struggle for clients because talent kind of gets it. We have a demographic in our agency that's pretty young. Portland's very hot. People get that you can live anywhere. From a client perspective, it's a little bit harder because they go, ooh, Maine, that seems very cold. And we're like, no, it's not
They don't
actually.
say, I went to
really
camp
cool."
there? They don't say, I went to camp
Some
there?
of them do.
Yeah,
but
yeah. You gotta work the camp angle.
yeah, the camp and I have a friend who lives there. They like
Right.
to come up and visit, so that's good. That's a
Right,
big new business
right.
strategy for us.
Right. So what have you personally found?
Spilling on myself.
Clean up on the stage, please.
Exactly. Clean up on aisle 3.
What have you found to be the biggest difference between your life in Maine versus Manhattan? Like, I'm sure you saved a ton of time commuting, or work ethic, hours in the office.
I think I do save a ton of time commuting. I mean, even I was living half an hour outside of Manhattan, and it took me 2 hours all in to commute, and now it's 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, no matter what.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, there have been more accidents on 295. I just
Yes,
heard
as
that
we
this
reported
morning. Yes.
yesterday. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that.
The thing I think that's most different is when I'm home, I'm home.
Yeah.
And when I was working in New York, and I won't say when you work in New York because that's a generalization, but when I was working in New York, I always felt like I had to be in the office, even if I didn't need to be in the office. And so I was working late, then you add on the long commute, because you just have to wait for the train to be at the right time and all of that. And I find that when I'm here, everybody works. Like, we work, people come in early, first of all, which is crazy. Advertising in America starts at 10 o'clock, but in Maine, it starts at 8:15. But we really get stuff done, so there's always going to be late nights, there's always going to be all-nighters in advertising, but it's not a culture where you just hang around to be seen.
Right.
And so when I get to be not traveling, I get to see my family more, and that's a real benefit.
For sure. So let's talk about your leadership style. If you had to describe your leadership style in a couple of words, what would they be?
Her real question is if you asked in 3 words, but Steve Smith did this first. Is he here? I don't know if he's here. Hi, and he stole the 3 best words. So you said empathy, integrity, and transparency, right? See, they're good. Now I have none. No, in actuality.
You can repeat.
Yeah. In actuality, I think there are 2 things I'd say. One is, I always say I'm nice until I'm not, which is I really work to bring out the best in people. And I try to be supportive and enthusiastic and point people in a good direction. And I have very high tolerance for, and I don't think people always know this, but I have a very high tolerance for trying things and failing. I think that's the best thing you can do. And I really want people to try things and fail. But if they aren't honest about it, if they aren't honest that they took a risk and it didn't work, if they try and hide something or they don't operate with integrity themselves, then I have a very low tolerance for that. So I'm nice until I'm not.
Nice until I'm not.
One way to say it.
Yeah. Now, we talked when we had met earlier about the VIA principles.
Yes.
And it really seems to be the foundation of the culture there that everyone can rally around. And there are 10, so I'm going to quiz you on them and talk about each one.
Okay. There are 10 principles. They were written on a cocktail napkin 20 plus years ago. And the nice thing about them is when the organization was very young, we're 23 years old now, almost 24. So it was, a couple years old. They decided we need to be a proper agency and have values and principles. So they thought it was going to be a really long and arduous exercise. And in fact, they wrote them on a cocktail napkin. Well, the two of the partners wrote them while the third partner was having a cigarette break. That's how long it took. Because when you know who you are, right? And there are 10 principles. We live by them. Every VN knows them and understands them. And my job is to protect them. And they are a nice balance of the art and science that represents our business. So they're be curious, which is really important because you can't do anything involving creativity if you're not just constantly curious about the world and always, always learning. That's so important. So be curious, honor the process, and think like the audience. Honor the process and think like the audience are important because in advertising, it's really easy to jump to the solution. Ooh, I have a great idea. I think this is it. And that's wonderful a lot of the time, but there's also always magic that's found in the process. You never know what you might uncover. So at VIA, we may write down what our initial hypothesis is, but we always go through the process and we remind ourselves that we're not the audience because you never know what you're going to see. So those are the first 3. Create respect is a really good one because it's very specifically not be respectful, which is more passive. Create respect is an active and thoughtful way to interact with peers, clients, and ultimately consumers that we're talking to. That's 4, right?
I have the whole list, by the way.
I know.
So if you,
But
yes,
after create
that's 4.
respect,
Yeah.
then you have be on time and be on budget, which be on time and be on budget are so important. We're business partners to our clients. But the best part about those is that they're on the list in the same plane with find the magic and figure it out. So be a good, responsible business partner, but also we're in the business of newness and freshness and creativity and ideas and magic. And sometimes when you come up with magic, there's no pathway of the person who did it before you. And so you just have to figure it out, which is also kind of our New England roots, which is kind of nice. And then the last 2 are do work that makes you proud, which is the best way to evaluate anybody. Because if you can say to someone, that's really good, but is it the best you can do? Are you really proud of this work? If they're not, you can tell right away. And if there's someone who cares about doing work that makes them proud, they're going to succeed at VIA. If they don't care about it, they're not going to succeed in our culture. And then the last one, which is our sort of uber principle, is believe. And believe is tied into the fact that we're sort of unabashed optimists. But we also, I think, feel like if you want to do anything great, you have to believe it's possible. And if you want to build the best agency in the world out of Portland, Maine, you better believe.
So the principles are really important to what happens day to day at VIA. And I know that you incorporate these into some of the things that really make your culture sing.
Yep.
So tell us about that.
So again, it's a blend of art and science, right? One of the first things that we did when I got there was sort of talk about how do we almost capture this culture in a bottle and make it bigger and scalable. And because it sort of always just was, it just happened naturally. And so we came up with this notion of go-dos. And it started because we had a conversation one day where I said, you know what I think makes VIA really, really different is we actually believe in magic. Like not everyone believes in magic, but VIA, everybody there really believes in magic. And that's partly because we love creativity. And so we were saying, how do we foster that all the time? How do we keep people fresh and inspired and feeling like anything's possible in a moment's notice? So we created this thing called Go Do, which is about infusing a constant stream of inspiration into the agency. And the intent is go try things, experience new things, get out of your comfort zone, do things, and then bring all those experiences back and feed it into the work that we do. So Go Do came to life in 4 kind of ways. We have lots of, we have all the teams. We have the bowling team, and we've had basketball teams and softball teams. That's all kind of basic stuff. We have a bocce court, and there's a tournament that exists of about 45 bocce teams every year. And the nice thing about it is it's a break in your day to get together with some people you might not be working with on any projects and just talk about things. So it's kind of jarring in the middle of the day. It's a 15-minute break, and that's great. Kind of wakes you up. So that's a very baseline. We have something called Free Beer and Fiction, which a guy named Teddy Steckline came up with, which is so great. He's an executive creative director with us. And any month, 3 names are drawn at random, and they're asked to write a story, and read it to the agency. So once a month, we have 3 readers, and we get together. And the best thing about it is that on any given month, it could be the chief creative officer reading, the office manager reading, and a young account strategist. So you never know, and there's no judgment. It's just complete openness, and that allows people to explore what's possible and try on a suit of clothes that might not be super comfortable for them. So that's great. And then that's kind of the ones that are establishment level. Mm-hmm. Then we have these things called spontaneous go-dos. And spontaneous go-dos are when, more or less, I get a whim. But we shut down the agency for an hour to have a lunchtime dance party at Gino's. Or, which was really good. We've done that one twice. It's the only repeat we have. I like to dance. So.
Yeah.
The second, we did a snow sculpture contest. One day it snowed a lot, and so we broke into teams of 5 and said, go. You have 20 minutes to conceive, create, and sell a sculpture. And they had to do all of that as teams that we literally went like in gym class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so people didn't know who they were going to work with. There was no preparation, et cetera. We've done laughing yoga. We've done improvisation. We've done sledding, anything that kind of breaks you out of the norm. We've done exotic food tasting so that you have to try new things. Go-dos are fun, and they're spontaneous, and they're surprise.
Talk about the singing day.
So we had a day, that's interesting because we had a day called Sing It, Don't Say It. And the hidden thing about go-dos is they do happen whenever I have a whim or somebody has a great idea in the agency, but they always have a moral to the story. We don't tell what the moral is, but there's always a point. So one day we had Sing It, Don't Say It Day, and everyone walked in, and there was a card and a microphone on their desk, and it said, welcome to VIA's full day go-do. It's Sing It, Don't Say It Day. All of your interactions today with other Vians must be sung. And it made people nervous, and there was some nervous laughter, but then there was a lot of singing. And it specifically said no judgments, you do not need to be on tone. And so people were singing all over the place and laughing and having a good time. And then it sort of quieted down, and then we ended up having a full agency sing-along at 3 o'clock to just finish it out. But somebody came to me and said, that was amazing. You know why? I was really nervous in the beginning, and I was just singing everything because I was sort of nervous, and I didn't even have tunes. I just was stringing words together. And he said, but as the day went on, I really started to think about what I was saying. And I was more thoughtful in my conversations and my exchanges with other people. And I didn't rely on emails. I went and had conversations because I had to think about, well, what song do I want to present this in? And he said it was super cool. And I'm like, yeah, really? I never imagined that it would make you think about what you say. But, it did, and they all do those things. Then there's the third level. And now I'm getting wonky, right? But,
No, you're not.
The third level is called the Hey You Go Do. And that is new this year, where we pull somebody's name at random and send them on an adventure. And we sent somebody the weekend before the New Hampshire primaries, we sent them off to New Hampshire with tickets to 7 events where they'd meet 8 candidates from both parties. We sent somebody down to Hamilton when Hamilton was big, as if it's not now, but we sent them down and had a New York theater experience. And was it yesterday or the day before? Yesterday? I really think we topped ourselves on this one. We pulled a name, and we are sending, in the spirit of Find the Magic, we're sending a Vian to the North Pole.
Whoa.
Next weekend.
That's awesome.
Pretty psyched about it, I have
Can
to
we
say.
send a reporter with them?
Sure.
Yeah, we should do that.
She is going to finish Lapland to a town called Ramnovia, I'm going to say it wrong, where there is a place called Santa's Village. It is at the base of the Arctic Circle. She will meet Santa, go to the elves' workshop. She'll stay in Santa's village. She will go on a reindeer safari. She will see the Northern Lights and come back to tell us all about it at the holiday party.
Oh, so
So-
they have to give a full report
They
on
always
their
have to give a
adventure,
full report.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just so, because they have to share the adventure with other people. And then the last thing is we have a sabbatical program. And again, that's a larger scale of the Hey You Go Do. We ask people to go try something that they haven't tried or learn something new and report back to the agency after 6 or 8 weeks being out.
Can I work there? Because it sounds really fun.
After the North Pole thing,
Yeah,
it's pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah. Now, if you don't get picked for that, though, they do have the Northern Lights at LLB through December 31st.
Yes, they do.
I just wanted to, I did want to mention that.
I'm going to try this again. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, okay. Success. So one of the things that I think is really intriguing that you have is the no vacation policy.
Yes.
So it sounds great. How's it working?
Well, it doesn't sound great when you call it a no vacation
Well,
policy.
that's true.
But I call it the
That's
no
right.
vacation policy.
Yeah.
So that makes it sound a little better. But we started that this year. And when we started the transition to employee ownership, it felt like if we're all in this together, we should all be in this together. And so we eliminated accrual of vacation. We still track vacation, and we still encourage people to take vacation. And you still have to tell your manager and make sure your calendar is appropriately managed. But you can really take as much vacation as you want. And it's worked out really well. I think we're actually up. A lot of companies, when they do it, their vacation goes down.
Mm-hmm.
We were nervous about that and actually decided that we were going to implement minimums in case if people weren't taking vacation, we were going to have a minimum that you had to take.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, people are taking vacation, and I think it's working well. I think in the beginning, people were like, wait, I can take as much as I want? Seriously? What's the catch?
Yeah.
No catch. You're an adult. We respect that. We respect your life, and let's just, be reasonable about when we're here and when we're not.
Do you think some people, though, actually like to have a set number of days? Like in preschool, you know how they really like to have a schedule and the kids freak out when the schedule is different? But you're finding that it works?
Yeah, we are finding that it works. I mean, I
Yeah.
suppose there's always some people who like that. But
Yeah.
there's nothing that says they can't map out their year and go, okay, I'm taking vacation here, here, and here.
Right.
So,
right. Plus,
I think it's...
And also if people would leave, although who would ever leave? Who would ever
Yeah.
leave via?
That's how I feel.
Yeah,
I feel like it's the greatest
You
place,
don't
but-
have really a vacation bank at the end, right?
We do
So
not have a
that's,
vacation bank.
From a corporate management thing, it's
Yes.
got many benefits for both employee and
It does have that, and that
employer-
benefits
employer.
employee ownership. Everybody bears those things that are operational as well.
That's right. Okay, let's switch and talk a little bit about the advertising business because it's changed so much, I'm sure, over
Yeah.
the course of your career. It's not really just about creating TV and radio and newspaper ads, of course, anymore. You're really more into the strategic process, right?
Yeah, I think VIA's always been very, very heavily strategic and analytical. And that's kind of the core of what we do, is we do deep analysis, we do really bold and innovative strategy, and then we ideate around how to bring that strategy to life, either operationally or creatively, we bring it to life. But yeah, where you bring it to life has changed dramatically. I don't think that core strategy and ideation has changed, but advertising is sort of a thing that the industry calls it now. I think there's just content in the world that people engage with. And sometimes that happens when they're, watching television and a 15 or 30 second or 60-second commercial comes on. But often it happens when they're on their phone. And the difference between a mobile ad or a website or an article is, it's just stuff I do on my phone.
Yeah.
And so we need to say, okay, so we have this great idea. How do we make it come to life? And so we're playing in a lot more sandboxes.
Well, a sandbox that seems to be getting a lot of buzz right now is sponsored content, native advertising. How does the agency think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we think about everything from the idea first. So I think we're learning as much as we can about absolutely every possible channel. And then we have a process called experience planning, which is once we have an idea, we have a 4-step process. I won't get into the details of it, but that helps us to say, how do we want the consumer to experience this idea? And sometimes you want them to experience it in a very organic way, and native is a really good way to do that because it's sponsored content and it's third party often, and it's a little less within our control, but it also has more credibility in some ways. So it's a balance, and you look at the whole experience and say, at this moment, what's the job that we're trying to do, and you match the right media outlet for that. So Native has a role.
So you're really creating content experiences for customers beyond the traditional ad units, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and some of those content experiences are read or played or experienced or listened to, and some of them are literally live experiences. So it's a range.
You told me about your experience with the Purple Forum, is that right? With the 4As
Yeah.
group. Can you talk a little bit about that and
Yeah,
what you learned from that?
I think it's fascinating. What I learned from it was, don't be so cynical, but we joined the 4As, which is I can do 10 principles and not the 4As, the Association of American Advertising Agencies. And we joined this year after not being members for a long time, and we were trying to take advantage of it, so we're participating in a lot of committees and forums and things and webinars and training for people, which is great. But I went to a group that was 11 CEOs of agencies, kind of all our size, and I spent 2 days with them in Chicago. And it was just fascinating because they're all slightly different, but kind of independent, same size. A couple of us have one agency, Small Agency of the Year, VIA did, and 2 of these other agencies. And I thought it was so fascinating, all the challenges that are just facing our industry and how everybody's kind of struggling with, how do I get faster and more creative and smarter and more open to collaboration and ideas, because the world is changing so much, and there isn't one channel that we're filling with a formulaic advertising approach.
So it's really a peer group for you,
Yeah.
and yet you actually may be competing for the same business.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It was incredibly transparent. I went into it thinking actually that it was going to be more kind of guarded because we could be competing. And actually one of the agencies in there, we had just won a piece of business that they lost. So I felt a little bad, but not
Yeah.
that bad.
Sit next to that person at lunch.
But I think they were super transparent, and it's a really interesting thing that in a business that's in such transformation, the ability to sit with other CEOs and just kind of honestly strip away all the advertising stuff and talk about how we're going to make this world more interesting and richer, and we're going to help our clients' businesses grow by really offering creativity in its purest sense. It was a really great experience, and I highly recommend that if something like that is offered to you, you jump on it, because it took me a little more than a jump. But
One of the hardest things, I think, for CEOs is to lead change management. And I'm sure at the agency that's something, just because the industry is evolving so much, you have to do. How do you tackle that?
yeah, it's tough. And going through a transition, as you said, from a founder to an outsider for
Right.
the CEO, there was a lot of change management in that. I think, look, there are a million studies and processes and things that you do, but ultimately, creating open conversation and feedback loops, I think, is really important, and then constantly checking in. We're not perfect at it, but we are really trying to make sure that we have opportunities for people to talk about how they're feeling and go through the process and work through the process. We have an open door policy, but not everybody's comfortable with that, so we have things like an anonymous suggestion box that goes kind of into a executive team whole so that we can see what's going on and people can feel comfortable with that. We have lots of agency meetings. We have meetings with lots of different groups within the agency, whether it's by level or by discipline or even by gender. We kind of try and talk to people in a lot of different ways. And I think that's kind of the underpinning.
Yeah, and you're never done, right? You're
Never,
done.
never.
Done.
That's one of the, I think we were talking about that. Yeah, you're never done. You have to keep saying what you're going towards over and over and over again. And I had somebody at the Purple Forum actually told this wonderful story. When he became CEO, he'd have these monthly meetings to tell the agency kind of what he was doing. And every month he had a new topic. And he thought he was doing a great job of telling everybody, this is the topic of the month, and look at how forward-thinking I am that I constantly are introducing new ideas. And in fact, about 6 months in, he realized he just had a completely confused agency. And he had to kind of back up and say, wait a minute, let me just repeat this one point over and over again. Because I think it's really hard for people to digest change. Mm-hmm. And so even with our vision, we spend a lot of time defining our vision, and we articulate it a lot. We go back to it at least every quarter, but constantly, and we're talking about it. But then we go and measure how we're doing against it. And we have very quantitative and qualitative measures that help us to say, how are we doing at this? And to keep connecting back and making the same point over and over again, because it's going to take us a while to get there. And just because you say it, it doesn't mean it's over.
Right, right. We're getting close to questions if folks want to start to think about them, and let's give some Leeann Leahy career advice. So talk about the role of mentors as you rose up through agencies.
Yeah. I was saying to Lisa before, I've had a lot of mentors. I feel very, very lucky. I've had some mentors that it gets to a point where it turns to kind of a rivalry, which is a little bit interesting. But I think that it's the number one principle of VIA that I always tell people when they say, how do I succeed in advertising? Be curious. Be curious. Just never stop learning. Look at everything. And I think that is what drives, it's what's driven my career. That's why I keep changing kind of what we're focused on and what I'm learning and how to bring more to the agency and to our clients and to the work. It's forward motion. If you're curious, you're always moving forward. So that's one thing. My other thing I always tell people is run towards the fire. And the Vians in the room have heard that, I'm sure, a million times. But run towards the fire for me is, it's a management style. It's just the way to make life easier. You know, there are some people who run away from the fire. They tend to actually get burned. If you run towards the fire, you're going to get burned at the outset. But man, you have a better shot of putting it out. Yeah. And so when we have something that doesn't go perfectly, either internally or with clients or whatever, I try and encourage everyone to go right at it.
That's a really courageous principle.
Yeah, I don't know if it always works, but
Yeah.
I think it's always the right first step. I had a new client, though, the other day. We had a little PR snafu, and she was so lovely. And she said, oh, it happens, it's fine. You know, the release went out like an hour too early, but it was fine. And she said, but, you know, the account person has been calling. He's left me 3 voice messages and 2 emails and a couple texts. Is everything okay? I was like, he's running towards the fire.
Yeah, that's great.
He was not avoiding you. He was trying to find you to
Yeah.
explain what happened. So.
Yeah, it's nice to see that in action.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very competitive to get into advertising and to succeed in advertising. What are the best skills, aside from being curious, that people really need to succeed? Because has it become, you know, more science than art? What's the balance of having analytical skills, creative skills?
Yeah. God, I wish I knew that answer exactly. But it is a balance of science and art. There are different skills, though. You don't have to know everything, but you have to be able to hear everything. Because I think the biggest thing is, if you love ideas, if you love creativity and ideas, you can succeed in advertising. But if you fall in love with your own ideas, you generally won't. Mm-hmm. Because I think loving ideas and trying to seek them out and inspire them in others and find them to help clients' businesses grow is really an awesome, it applies to every single discipline within advertising. But because of the fact that the world's changing so much, because there's so much science to it, I think it's crucial to be able to stress test those ideas and see if they're effective. Because, you know, ideas without effectiveness is art, mm-hmm. not advertising. Mm. And advertising has to have the business side.
Okay, one of my favorite Like a Boss questions is, what keeps you up at night?
Newness. Newness, but not like innovation and newness, but not for just newness sake, but because everything's changing, because everything's coming together, because content is taking over what was once advertising. How can we constantly have new ideas? It's at the heart of everything we do. Yeah. And I really think it's the hardest thing. I mean, creativity is such an amorphous thing, right? Mm-hmm. If I asked everyone in the room, when was the last time you had a great idea, where were you? How many people would say in your office, sitting at your desk, thinking really hard? Anyone?
That's funny.
No. So, you know, we have to create the environment that fosters creativity. We have to be able to draw it out of people. We have to give them the freedom to find it. And finding new ways to do that never get stale takes up a lot of my energy.
Yeah. So what's one brand that if you had the chance to work with, you would absolutely love to?
There are so many. Say, I would have said L.L. Bean, but now we're lucky to work with L.L. Bean. Because we didn't work with L.L. Bean for 23 years, and it kind of was crazy right down the street, and I think it's such perfect timing, and we're so happy to be working together. But brands we don't have, I was just talking to Guinness yesterday. That would not suck.
Yeah, there might be a little battle to work on that account.
That could be fun.
Yeah.
But I was thrilled to be able to talk to them. We have a lot of spirits experience. We have some beer experience. But Guinness is like, it's more than a product. Mm-hmm. It's a culture. It's a lifestyle. It's a true brand.
It's like a meal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is a meal too. Yeah. Breakfast in some countries.
Right, that's right.
But I think it's that magical thing. There are some brands that they're so pure that people understand what they are and defend them with their lives. Mm-hmm. And my favorite brands that I've ever worked on have that zealous consumer base who defend the brand from the outside world. And I think Guinness has that. So that would be really cool. We're also talking to McLaren cars, which is kind of cool because race cars, you know.
Yeah, that would be fun to try out.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, you kind of got a pretty cool gig, Leeann.
I can't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I pretty much feel like I won the lottery.
Yeah, I think you did. So describe your Maine.
Describe my Maine. Mm-hmm. It involves fireplaces. Mm-hmm. I love fireplaces. I have a lot of them, and I love to burn wood every day, summer and winter. And, you know, for me, I started coming to Maine probably about 25 years ago. My sister went to Bowdoin, and we started coming up as a family. And I was always struck by just the rocky coast. Just more than a beach or even the woods or mountains, like just that rocky, unbridled, passionate, ferocious coast that on a beautiful day is crashing and blue and just so full of life that I got hooked.
As we all did. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And,
Thank you.
Let us... questions. It's question time. Who has a question?
Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting to a great idea, starting with planning?
Yep. So the traditional process is, you know, we get an assignment from a client. We will dissect and digest all the information, analyze some potential solutions, write a brief, pass the brief to, which is full of insights and information. We'll pass that to the creative team. They'll come up with ideas. We'll all come together and we'll evaluate them. And then once we have an idea, we decide how to deploy that idea. That's the traditional approach. That's kind of the way advertising's worked for a very long time. In this changing world that Lisa kept referring to, we're thinking more and more about how do you get to more openness faster? And how do you put together teams that are not always the same? So it's not always an account person and a planner and a creative team, but maybe it's, you know, one creative and a filmmaker, or, you know, a digital guy and a musician, because the ideas might come to life in any form. So we're starting to think about it more as an assignment comes to us and we triage it to say, okay, how are we going to tackle this? What's the right team to bring together, both from a casting perspective and in terms of their skill sets? And then write a brief and start working simultaneous to getting all the understanding so that we can be throwing more things on the wall more quickly from more angles. So it's changing a lot, and it's probably going to get pretty messy, but fun.
Susan? Oh, sure, I'll repeat your question.
I think many in the room would aspire to work with Via. Oh, my voice is really going. Chip's going to be happy. What is the smallest account? I don't know. I'm going to try that. Thank you. What is the smallest account that could be considered for Via? And do you ever wish to play in the game of Maine small business and create Via Light? Or what are all the businesses of Maine to do? Because that's what's a two-part question.
Yeah, let me
Got it.
repeat the question from Susan. Is many businesses would aspire to work with Via. What's the smallest level that you would consider working with, and have you ever thought about creating a Via Light to support small businesses in Maine?
Yeah. Great questions. So I think there is no smallest level. We evaluate everything on its own merit. What we do look for on those accounts that aren't revenue-based, there's always going to be some accounts that are more revenue-generating and some that are not, but we look at not necessarily the size of it, but how creative we can be. So we did when Pokemon Go was popular, we did an augmented reality game with the Portland Museum of Art, and that, we did pro bono. But it was such a great creative opportunity that we just jumped in and went for it, and they were so amazing to work with, and it was really fun to do. And I think that's it. When we'll work with any size client, but the smaller ones were more critical of making sure that it's real, true creativity and not just kind of checking the boxes of designing their, standard stuff that they were doing before. We want to offer something that's world-shaking a little bit. So that's kind of that threshold question. And then, have we ever considered creating a VIA Lite? I don't think we have. I think VIA is really, really committed to the community. And so it's not a separate arm. It's more, what can we do? Who can we work with? We have worked with lots of Maine brands, just not on a long-term basis, but doing lots of different projects here and there. And I think if we took that outside of the agency, we'd somehow lose touch with our home base. And I don't want to lose touch with who we are and where we are. We want to bake that in. So I hope that answers your question.
Yep. One from Kate.
I was wondering if you could tell us about a time that things didn't work, that you went through the process and things failed and you had to execute plan B, and what you did and what you learned from it.
How much time do we have left?
Yeah.
Gosh, there's so many of those in life, aren't there? Let's think. A time that it didn't work. Well, I think we had a client a few years ago called Republic Wireless, and they were going to take down the cell phone industry by offering wireless on Wi-Fi. So you didn't actually have to have a cell phone plan. You'd use free Wi-Fi, and then they were going to be using the Sprint network as a backup. So when you weren't on a Wi-Fi network, it would switch over to Sprint. And they were a low-cost but provider of smartphones, and it was going to reduce bills significantly. So we loved this idea, but we thought, okay, how are we going to tell this story? Because it's kind of techie and complicated, right? So we decided to create a character who would tell it for us. And we spent a lot of time crafting this character, coming up with how he was going to be portrayed, what he looked like, how he sounded, where he lived, what his Twitter feed was, what his Instagram was. We made him as real as possible because he was going to tell the story for us. And we misjudged the fact that if you're going to create a human being in the world and get them noticed, which is effectively what we were trying to do, create a character as a human being, that takes a lot of resources. Like, people don't just show up in the world. There's a growing process that we all go through as individuals, and we kind of forgot that in creating this character. And so we put him out there, and it went like, it didn't get the traction that we had hoped. It didn't get the clarity of communication we hoped, and didn't get the Twitter following we hoped. But I think we had to quickly dial back and say, okay, this isn't working. What else can we find? Maybe we don't explain the technology of all of this. Maybe that's not important. Maybe we go straight to the benefit of low cost, which we avoided at first because the category was talking about that, and we wanted to be different from cell phones. But maybe there's a reason the category was talking about it. So we had to find a new way to talk about it as opposed to a new message. So that's one example of many over the last million years.
You should have got the Verizon guy who's now the Sprint guy, right?
Yeah.
Who could have been the Republic. Just a suggestion. Not in love with that idea. Amy's
Yes.
got the mic.
So I get up every morning. This is going to sound a little gratuitous, but I get up every morning and at this time of year, I put on my coat and I trudge out to my mailbox and I pick up my Press Herald. And when my kids are home, they look at me and they say, "Oh, Dad, you're such a loser," especially when it's snowing or whatever. But my understanding of the daily newspaper business is it was built on a platform of advertising revenue. And I suspect, as we all kind of know, that it's been eroded by all the other competitive media outlets. So what advice would you give our host today so that 10 years from now, my newspaper will still be in the mailbox?
Okay.
We are recording
That's
this,
a good
right?
question.
We're recording this.
Great question. I think that more media and more content opportunities in the world does not mean that any of the old ones are not relevant. It means you have to find their place. And part of our process of experience planning and deploying an idea and choreographing that experience is saying, what are we trying to accomplish and what's the right medium for that? And I think understanding in the same way, you and I were kind of talking about it the other day, right? In the same way that you guys are reporting real news and you have a point of view on it and you're sharing it with the world, and one way you're sharing it is through a newspaper. But then you have all these other platforms and treating those all as one thing because it's your point of view and your take on the news. So you and I were talking about how getting editors to also be responsible for the social feed around that same article because they're managing that conversation. That, I think, is what makes media properties match up with how we choreograph the experience of the idea. Having that consistency of conversation through multiple forms. And I think if you guys continue to do that and not, I mean, I know it's in your mind because we were talking about it, not separating out like the social people do this and the digital people do that and the Facebook manager does this and the writer does that, but tying those more closely together makes it easier for us to use them to spread our message and idea. But I also think there's a giant generation of people out there that I call the antenna generation. I'm one of them, but we used to have antennas on our TVs. And there is a fluidity of our generation also of wanting to experience different things in different ways. You know, and a lot of people of that generation they pay all their bills online, right? We pay all our bills online. We are heavily engaged in social media. We watch, tons of viral video, et cetera. We are doing 50 different experiential things. We're listening to cool music. We've got all that young stuff going on. But at the end of the day, we still love the tactile nature of things like a newspaper or, even engaging with radio through a podcast or television. And being able to follow the audience as they weave through all these channels and maintain the conversation is more important than ever. So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah,
helps,
so
but-
thank you for the best question ever, ever asked. And you tell your kids that you're not a loser, that you support real journalism.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Hi. You talked about brands. Maine is a wonderful brand. You have your own feelings about Maine, and hopefully you guys will be in the competition next time the account comes up. But there are a lot of big brands that have used Maine as part of their brand, like Poland Spring, like LL Bean. And I think that's great for the state when such iconic brands use us as part of their branding. So my question to you is, LL Bean, will they still focus about Maine as their base of love, so to speak?
I think the answer is that we're exploring lots of different things together with them. Maine is certainly an important part of that brand, but we're discovering through that process that we're going through of the relevance that has to opening up, not just continuing to get the current users here, but opening it up to new people. And I think, I don't know the answer yet. We're working through it, but it's definitely something to research. We've learned a lot about how people view Maine and what Maine stands for. And we're still learning about its appeal in selling specifically LL Bean, but I think it's different for each brand. And it's really, there's no simple answer. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I think Maine is a magical place for a lot of people. And it's a matter of whether the brand principles and values match up with the Maine values, and that draws a new audience.
Hi. Many consumers now aren't looking necessarily to brands to tell them what's cool. they're looking towards influencers to tell them what's cool, and that kind of dictates what services and products that they buy. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to, because we're a small brand, and getting influencers on board, and really, does that dictate how you get creative about your ad campaigns and whether or not you're using these influencers with 500,000 followers on Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, influencers, that's a really, really important point. Influencers are effectively a new channel to tell a brand story, right? And I think the thing that happens, it's like spokespeople of the past, but influencers, you're handing them the keys to your brand and saying, talk about it in the way that you organically and naturally feel. I think the key is using it at the right time to make the right points, but also getting the right influencers, because so often people choose an influencer based on how many Twitter followers they have or how many Instagram followers they have, more than do they reflect and represent what my brand is all about. As much as mobile advertising or television or radio or newspaper or digital banners, influencers are right up there in the mix as a potential channel to tell our story. It's really important, and it's a scary one sometimes because as I say, you're handing over the keys. But if you go and really vet them and find the right person who can tell your story well, it's a huge win because the credibility is there. You get, and it's kind of double PR, right? You get PR for doing a connection with that influencer, and then you get the PR of their influence. So it's a huge growing opportunity. And I think that people just kind of choose the top people. I just heard this morning on the way here that Selena Gomez has surpassed Taylor Swift in Instagram followers. It's pretty big news in my world. But so if everyone just starts running after Selena Gomez because she has the most followers, some brands will win with that, but most will fail because she may not be the perfect match. And I think that you might do better with somebody who has, 500,000 followers who are the right followers, who have the right story about the brand, than you would with somebody who has 500 million.
And is generally the relationship with the influencer, is it paid?
It depends, but yes, often it's paid in some form. Often there's, there are lots of ways to structure it. Kim Kardashian's about $300,000 a tweet, in case you're interested.
Wow.
Yeah. But you can also, first of all, you can find emerging people. You can barter with them. You can support their charitable causes. There's lots of different ways. And honestly, Odell Beckham Jr. was in one of the Welch's spots because he loves peanut butter and jelly. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, who doesn't, I suppose? But this was a new product that was peanut butter and jelly between 2 graham crackers frozen. You could eat it frozen or thawed. It's pretty awesome. It's called the Welch's Graham Slam. I highly recommend it. But Odell Beckham Jr. genuinely loved Welch's grape jelly on PB&J. So it was a natural fit, and he wanted to do it.
Yeah. So you think you got the I Love PB&J discount a little bit
I think
from
we
that?
did.
Yeah.
We got a little PB&J discount.
Love it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure his freezer is just full of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That comes with it. But we used him in the spot, but that was a tiny piece of it. Really, he was, what he was lined up to do was Instagram and Facebook and tweet about it and, be eating it on the sidelines and all that stuff. But
That's cool.
Hi there. Obviously, globally and nationally, we're in a very hot political climate. I'm just wondering how you handle that in your industry, but also how you handle that within your agency, running a business where you may have a lot of opinions within your agency, but then obviously with the advertising agency, you have to be you can tap into the anxiety that's out there, you can assuage the anxiety that's out there. So I'm just curious how you deal with that as an agency.
So there are a few questions in there. Thank you. I think the first one of kind of how do we deal with it in the world, within our organization. We have to, create respect, right? We have to be respectful of one another and understand that everybody has different opinions. So the agency itself does not take a political stance. Many agencies do, but VIA doesn't. So that anyone should be comfortable to have whatever feelings they have within the organization, and we have to be tolerant and supportive of one another regardless of their views. That's inside the agency and with our clients. But outside, and the work that we put together is a kind of different story. And I wrote an email that I never sent, and I kind of go back and forth on sending it, that was about how negative everything's gotten, right? And we're so lucky, right? I'm so lucky because I'm in advertising, which means I have a soapbox. And my job and our job is to influence people's behavior. And wouldn't it be nice if we could spend our time influencing it to be positive towards one another? And wouldn't it be nice if we made sure that everything that we create puts a little bit of good in the world? Just doesn't preach, but somehow is good and beautiful and optimistic and open, because we have that soapbox and not everyone has it. And there's just so much negativity and anger and hatred. And man, our principles are believe and find the magic. If we're not going to do it, who is? So as I said, maybe I'll go back and send it. But I wrote this, but I wrote the email like, come on, man, let's all take advantage of this amazing opportunity that we have as an agency to make the world a little bit brighter.
We'll take one last question.
First of all, thank you. To finish off with a little bit of fun, personally, you've spent a career in advertising. What are your personal 2 most favorite ad campaigns, whether you did them or not?
That's a good one. God, I have so many things that I fall in love with as ideas. I have to say, I loved everything about the Snapple campaign when I worked on that. It was using a person within Snapple, ignoring the world's perspective on body image and perfect casting, and finding somebody who had a big heart and kind of putting that at the center and celebrating the people who use your products and who love your products. Like, that's what that whole campaign was about. And I loved it so much because, this is wonky, but our strategy behind that was, we're going to do 100% natural marketing, because if Coke and Pepsi are 100% artificial, Snapple's going to be 100% natural. So everything they did, we did the opposite. If they bought the Super Bowl, we bought the Pee Wee League. If they bought the Grammys, we bought the school concert. And it was just so fun to constantly be thinking of new things to turn advertising on its head. So that was really fun, and I'm dating myself a bit, but that was one of my favorites. And then, I don't know if, I guess, man, this is really going to date me. There was a campaign for 9X forever ago, and it was entirely based on puzzles and puns. So, I don't know, do you remember this campaign? It was.
I remember the brand, though, of course.
Yeah, it was a Yellow Pages campaign. So, of course, what's more boring than the Yellow Pages, right? And it was a campaign for the Yellow Pages that would put up an image without any words, and you'd have to figure out what it was. So it would be like a purple rabbit, and it would be up for 6 weeks or so. And then they'd just put up hair dye, page 235. And it was just always, you'd kind of have fun with the campaign because you'd see it and be like, ooh, what is that? And try and figure out the puzzle. And then it was always more clever than you. And it was just, I thought, constantly brilliant. And I strive to do work that, no one's ever going to recreate that, but you do work that engages people at that level, then that's a win. So, but there's so many things. Snickers did and I worked on them forever ago, but they just did a effort not that long ago where they changed the labeling on their package to read frustrated, tired, whatever the words were that are all like hangry words, because then you could say, you know what, you really need this. And I thought that was so brilliant. Yeah, and that, again, not traditional advertising, it's the package. But what better advertising than making the consumer experience part of playing out their strategy? You're not you when you're hungry. So.
I think one of the most creative platforms is outdoor, but yet
Yes.
I'm so thankful that we don't have it in Maine.
know.
But it is a fun, it is a fun platform.
It is a fun platform if you are respectful of what it is.
Right.
And there are ways to do outdoor without doing interruptive billboards too.
But I'm still thankful we don't have any.
I agree.
in Maine. So thank our guest, Leeann Leahy,
Oh, thank
CEO
you.
of the Leah Agency.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
you all for getting up early.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. The podcast of this event will be online later, I'm sure. Chad, our crew, is got that under control. And also, I did a podcast with Pat Scully from Bernstein Shore, which will also be posted as well. And We look forward to seeing you next year for more in this series, so thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.